everyone, and welcome to today's episode on YO.DH Dialogue, a podcast where we dive deep into digital health with experts from the field. YO.DH, or Youth Ownership of Digital Health, is a community of young digital health professionals from across the world. And no, if you are new here, do not forget to click the link in the description to become a member of this wonderful community. Today's episode is part of a very special series celebrating Digital Health Week, a global week of action to promote digital health as a means of accelerating universal health coverage. And we have dedicated each single day to look at specific themes on digital health. And for today, we will be exploring future-proofing digital health through allied leadership and a digitally enabled workforce. I am your host for today, Prince Bonney, and I am very proud to be part of this series co-hosted by YO.DH, Transform Health, and Young Experts Tech for Health. Today, we'll be having our discussion with a very special woman. She is a woman of many professions, and she is on a personal mission to build and support communities to develop innovative solutions that transforms society while protecting the dignity and impacting economies positively. Ladies and gentlemen, Nekesa is the Director of Community at Medic, where she works to scale the positive health impact achieved with community health toolkits, building and fostering vibrant community of practice. Nekesa also is the CEO at the iHub, one of Kenya's first innovation hubs, where she championed an open innovation culture that was integral in ensuring quick maturity of Kenya's innovation ecosystem. Nekesa was named one of the 100 most influential African leaders in 2023 by Connecting Africa and the African Tech Festival, and was recognized as a 2024 leading woman in digital health by Digital Health Africa. Nekesa, welcome.
Thank you so much, Prince. Thank you for that introduction, and I'm so excited to be here with you today.
I'm super excited too as well. How does it feel, before we get into the question, how does it feel to become one of the 100 most influential women on Africa, the whole continent?
Well, actually, so that one was actually men and women. So it's 100 most influential people,
Wow.
and it felt amazing, and it was a huge surprise. It was amazing. And I think, like many other humans, you go through a process of, did they make a mistake? Did they really mean me? But then
I
as you
know.
as you come to terms with it and you embrace it and accept it, it really feels good to be honored for the work that you do, and for that work to be recognized, and also to be in the company of 99 other people doing such incredible work. So that's been a highlight for me, and it's a glow that I'm still embracing. I hope you can still see the glow as I speak. I'm still embracing it much as it happened last year, milking it for all it's worth.
Exactly. It must feel special, and like this is a wonderful, like tremendous journey you've had over the period. I want to find out. I know for a woman, especially in this continent, you've encountered several challenges and you have overcome many of them. That is why you are part of 100 most influential people in Africa. Can you quickly tell us about your journey?
Ooh, so you're right. And when I get this question about challenges, or when I get to talk about challenges, it's, for me, it's always the same ones. They're challenges that continue to exist, and so challenges that I've had to find a way to navigate. And so you're so right. I'm a Black woman on the African continent. I've ticked three boxes of things that many times don't work to your advantage. And so it's been an interesting journey, uh, figuring out how to navigate that challenge, And so right from the time when I worked at the iHub, I worked at the iHub for close to 8 years. And anyone who knows the iHub knows that we were a gateway for innovation for the country, for Kenya. And what this means is that lots of people walked through our doors, different nationalities, speaking different languages, and so on. Um, and so I had to meet lots of different people, and some experiences were pleasant and some weren't. And the same in my work that I did with AfriLabs, where I was for 2 years as director of strategy. Now you're expanding this times 50 something, African countries, because we had coverage across the continent. And so you're experiencing innovation in different countries across the continent and interacting with those people, interacting with their funders, cross-pollination of ecosystems between Africa and other continents. And so again, you're in the midst of people, different cultures, different nationalities, and all of this. And so as an African woman, I think we're beginning to get this radar where we look at someone and we already know, or we feel I have been judged, or there's going to be extra steps that I need to make in order to get to point zero. So already we're starting from a negative, trying to get to point zero where we can begin to have conversations and work with people. And we're human, and so it's going to be it's going to be a challenge, and sometimes it's going to get you really down in those kinds of situations. But for me, have found my way navigating that has worked for me over years is to embrace it. So yes, you're an African woman on the African continent. You're a Black African woman on the African continent. So guess what? Yes, you are an African woman on the African continent. And that means that you've got so much going for you. You understand your environment, you understand your continent. You have an innate empathy that comes with the way that you lead and the way that you interact with people. And I've just really just learned to use that to my advantage in the way that I interact with people, in the way that I develop my relationships, in the way that I find champions for myself and my work in the different organizations that I have worked for. And that's basically how I've managed to navigate those challenges with relationships and just embracing who I am and making that work for me.
Wow, wow, wow. This, like, I was noting down things when you were speaking, and one thing that stood out for me was embracing the challenges and then making it work for you. That's how best you can overcome these challenges. And I'm glad you mentioned I have in here and knowing your expertise in the digital health space. And what has changed in the healthcare landscape? Let's look at it from since the time you started working in the healthcare landscape to now that we need to create a digitally enabled workforce. And do you think we are ready for this transformation from the topmost level to the last mile?
Whew. So, so what has changed? This is a wonderful question because definitely my experience working with startups, SMEs, and other people in the health sector while at iHub is very different from my experience now working with Medic. Um, in my time at iHub, what's constant? Let's begin with what's constant. Actually, what's constant is there's lots of innovation around health, the health space, digital health space, and so there's innovators, there's entrepreneurs, there's large businesses all building incredible things in the space. I'd say the key difference is back then it was such a niche space. It was difficult. People found it difficult to understand, and only high risk investors were willing to invest in that space, in that market. What I see as a core difference now, and I feel a lot of this has happened because of the pandemic, because of the COVID pandemic, is that a lot more people, a lot more funders are willing to take the risk. And a lot more people are embracing, again, the digital space and wanting it to work for them. And there's a lot more ownership of that space and what it can do. And so now increasingly you're seeing more governments wanting to digitize their digital health processes. And if they've done it before, wanting to do it at scale. and truly taking ownership of that process. And so that's really beautiful, beautiful to see, where the digital health tools have moved from a nice to have to essential tools, that any government, any country really should be thinking about having and scaling, across the nation. Now, are we ready for it? Um, I think digital transformation, and especially digital health transformation, really needs a change in mindset. It needs a change in skill, and it needs a change in infrastructure. And I think, unfortunately, we're not all the way there where you have the three available at one go. You'll find that sometimes you have the right mindset, and you have a very progressive government or a very progressive country, but then they don't have the skills or infrastructure in place. Or you have a country that has the right infrastructure, but perhaps the leadership doesn't have the right mindset. And so we are progressing, but we are progressing unevenly. And so there's some work to do to even out that ground to where anyone wanting to embrace and begin to implement digital health has the right mindset, the right skills, and the right infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you. We know that there is substantial inequality of resources or funding between high income countries and low and medium income countries. And you mentioned that if we want to be ready, we need change of mindsets, change of infrastructure, change of skills. What are the ways in which this difference between these two different economies affect the rate of approach of technology, and in turn delay the benefits of technology in addressing its intended need?
Mm. Right. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. So what you said is that it delays, and that is so true, because the discrepancies or the challenges that we're facing in low to middle income countries, it means that the adoption of technology is going to be much slower, or the implementation is going to be much slower. And what that means is going to impact health delivery, right? Um, and again, we are where we are, and so what do we do about it, right? One of the things we've tried to do at Medic is mitigate for those circumstances. And so our tool, the CHT, is offline first, right? And that means that our community health workers are able to deliver care as they collect data, and then sync that data once they get to a place where they can then connect, right? And also, one of the things that the Ministry of Health in Kenya has done, and I suspect this is happening in different parts of the continent as well, is that they're whitelisting the devices that community health workers use, right? And that means that things like data become less of a frustration for the community health workers as they're delivering care. And so it it we are again in a situation where we have to innovate for our circumstances. And there's a phrase that I use, in fact overuse, that I borrowed from one of our leaders at the IHUB, and he used to say, if it works in Africa, it will work anywhere. And what that means is that the circumstances within which we have to work are so diverse, sometimes are so challenging, that if you build a product that's able to work despite the infrastructure issues, despite all the other challenges, the policies, etc., if you build a device or an innovation that's able to work in this market, then you really have a huge market beyond the African continent. And I think for me, that's what drives me. It's the fact that if I can develop, if the teams that I'm working for can develop things that work in these markets where there's so many challenges that we face every day, you wake up and you're like, man, is this really, is this a challenge? Is this a fight, that I want to keep fighting? But the fact that the work that we do has such great impact, and that you can see it and feel it on the ground, especially when you're very close to where the problems are. I think for me, that's what motivates me, and what I hope motivates anyone that listens to this. But the other thing I wanted to say is that such challenges then affect, even when we're able to implement, when we're able to push for adoption of tools and so on, then those challenges are still going to affect how those tools work to some extent, right? And so one example is, again, in the work that we do, we have the community health workers collecting data and so on. And this data has been synced, it's been analyzed, it's showing up on a dashboard somewhere. Now, imagine the challenge of that data not being accurate. So you have data, yes, but because of infrastructural issues, perhaps the community health workers aren't able to get to all their households on time and deliver care and record data. Perhaps there's still connectivity issues despite the whitelisting and the off to and the you know, everything that you've done to try and mitigate. What that means is, despite our best efforts, we're still being slowed down by things that are beyond our control. So we are collecting data, but is it current? Is it clean? You know, is it information that we can make critical decisions off of, right? And so when you begin to look at it from that perspective, that it's slowing us down, that it's making some of the interventions that you want to have not as effective as they could be, that it's impacting healthcare delivery, then this really is a challenge that needs to be addressed as soon as possible. So again, going back to infrastructure, mindset, and skill.
Yeah, yeah, infrastructure, mindset, and skills. You made mention of some challenges that still exist, especially in the healthcare landscape. And we are all aware that in most organizations and most institutions, the leadership style is typically bottom a top down approach, right? It's always from the
Yeah,
boss to the managers down to the last person at the office. How
yeah.
can we empower grassroots leaders to create change from a bottom up approach? Because we've seen top down approach and these challenges still exist. How can we empower those from the bottom to make changes, like from the bottom up approach, so that we can create a change for lasting impact? And do you think, this is a 2 in 1 question, do you
Okay.
think that grassroots leadership can help democratize and enable equitable access to healthcare resources?
So I love this question because it speaks to my personal mission around supporting local communities to innovate for themselves and in the process continue to maintain their dignity and really impact their own economy. So yes, the answer is there is always, many times you find top bottom approach, but can the bottom top approach work? Absolutely, it can. I really believe it that it can, and I think the fast way to do that is to appreciate that leaders at the grassroots level are a lot closer to the problem than you are, right? They are a lot closer to the problem than you are. That means they live and breathe the challenges that they're looking to fix, right? And even for that alone, we should be paying a lot more attention to them and taking leadership from them. And then the second thing we need to appreciate about these leaders is that they are leaders. And so they haven't been sitting waiting for a savior. They've been working on these challenges and they've been building solutions, right? And so we need to appreciate that there are solutions in place and there's steps that these leaders have taken to fix the issues that their communities are facing. And so once you know that, then you need to give them the space to express what these solutions are and to share them with you. And you need to respect that space in which, in which they are sharing it. And once you've done that and you've understood it, then you hope that they invite you, or you need to give them a reason to invite you to co create with them their solutions and what they have. And this is your opportunity to build from what they have already and collaborate with them to understand why it might not be working, and then combine their existing solutions with your proposed solution and figure out what happens then, right? And I think that if you take that approach of letting them lead and understanding their perspective and what they have tried, what's working, what's failing, and then plugging in your solution in a way that supports them, then that's supposed to amplify their messaging, supposed to amplify that work, and really gives them the ownership that's so critical. Because the last thing that you want is to drop a solution and then leave assuming that it's going to be adopted when they haven't embraced it, they don't understand it. And so why not build something with them that they would be happy, excited to carry on even in your absence, right? And so for that reason, I feel it's really important for the bottom up approach, and for them to take leadership of that process as well.
Exactly, exactly. It's very important that we give them a seat. There's this saying here in Ghana that says if you want to find out what exactly is happening in an institution, speak to the bottom workers, the cleaners, the drivers, the security guards. They are going
That's
to
where
tell you what
that's where
exactly,
all the juicy details are. And
exactly,
that's where all the truth
exactly.
is.
Exactly. That's where all the truth is. The top level will always be diplomatic about how they answer questions, but at the grassroots level, you will get all the juicy stuff. You made
Absolutely.
mention in your earlier submission that to be able for us to get to a point where we are ready for the transformation, I always like saying that we need to change our mindset, change infrastructure, and change their skills. Like we need to be innovative about it. How are governments and other funders who are supporting in creating a digitally enabled infrastructure that can help in creating a digitally enabled workforce? How do they come in to support to help us get a digitally enabled infrastructure that can help us create a digitally enabled health workforce?
Right. So, what's the role of governments and other funders? Uh, so, the governments, as I see it, have the primary responsibility of building the digital health infrastructure of a country. Yeah, that's a primary role that they should lead. Even if they were to be inviting other people, it's definitely one that they should lead. So they decide the priorities. They decide the rules of engagement. They decide whatever policies, that they're going to roll out, and invite other people to exist within that national digital infrastructure. And many times that may mean that they then need some extra support when it comes to funding, let's say, whatever solutions or services are going to exist above that infrastructure that they have laid. And I think that this is where funders come in, or any other private sector members. Really, they would work within the rules of engagement set by the government, right? Um, but they also have such a critical role to play, financial and non-financial. And so the role of funders, I think, is to, yes, fund, but is also to identify those services, those solutions that can exist on the infrastructure that governments have built, and then to finance it. So identify it, the due diligence and all of this, and make recommendations, to governments, and then finance those entrepreneurs or those businesses that they're recommending that the government should use as the second layer to the infrastructure that they have set, or any other service providers. So for me, there's two critical things, and definitely there's other players, but then the focus now is on the governments and the funders. So build the infrastructure and then fund it. But the other thing that I'll say that I think is really critical, that funders need to pay attention to, even as they go into these markets and support governments, is that they're in the business of taking risks. And that is something they should embrace, and come in understanding that majority things are high risk. And I think if we get to that place where everyone understands the value of what they're bringing in, the governments understand and are able to communicate the value of the infrastructure, the funders understand and are able to communicate the value of the risk that they're bringing in, then there's quite a very powerful relationship that is built there, that then makes it possible for people like us that build solutions, entrepreneurs, innovation hubs, and all of this to then fill in the remaining plugs that are needed to take, these national infrastructures to the next level.
order for us to have a digitalized healthcare system, right, technology has to be adopted by all stakeholders at all levels for us to achieve a digitalized healthcare system. You made mention of mindset. This comes to play here, where we are all ready to accept and adopt this new technology that the government or funders are rolling out, the infrastructures that they are putting in place to help us create a digitally enabled workforce, right? So, what are some of the challenges that you see in achieving this? Sure.
So I think one challenge is definitely limited digital literacy, right? And this is across levels, and it's understandable because we weren't born, a lot of the existing demographic were not born in a digital age, and so this is a learning curve that we've had to adopt. We've had to learn to use tools. We've had to learn about our data security, and all of this. And then now there's the added pressure of needing to learn it in the workplace, because you're being told that if you can't adopt these tools in the workplace, then maybe we don't need you anymore, right? And so limited digital literacy, I think, is a huge challenge. And the way that I see it manifesting right now is, uh, again, referencing my work at Medic with our community health workers. It's really important that we are constantly teaching them how to use the tool, not just the device, but the actual application, and especially because it's constantly iterated. One training session is definitely not enough, and so we are constantly looking for resources. Our partners, our implementing partners, are constantly looking for resources to ensure that community health workers are kept up to date, with the digital tool, and its features, that they have to use in their daily work. But it's also important for others to be aware of the digital space and how it works. And so think about, now, on the other end of the spectrum, it's very important for a Ministry of Health to not just have set up the digital infrastructure, but to have people working there that understand the digital space and understand the tools, that they're working with, or the tools that they're enabling to be worked with. And so there's also uh, a real need for public sector and private sector to ensure that even in their spaces, digital literacy remains paramount. And a second step to that is not just that the digital literacy remains paramount, but that they're able to keep that talent on for longer. Because one of the challenges that we see now is that you will train a good worker, who will then leave soon after for a better paying job, or whatever. So, what our retention policies? How are we able to retain that talent to ensure that the investment we are making in teaching them things doesn't go to waste, but they're able to pay it back into the organization for, a reasonable amount of time and support implementation. And of course, another challenge would be infrastructure constraints. So, our internet connectivity, internet penetration across Africa, there's still some work to do there to get to the last mile for, a lot of countries. There's limited device access, and so if you don't have the right internet penetration and you have limited devices, then what that's going to mean for you is, obviously, that's going to be slow adoption of tools. And this becomes increasingly important in the digital health space, because if we're saying that we're delivering care or passing on health information using digital tools, then the other side of that coin is making it so that the people that we intend to use these tools have access to the internet and have actual access to devices.
True. I the issue of digital literacy is like very one of the major challenges, because we can set up the infrastructure, we can work on the internet, we can get everything functioning very well, especially in the healthcare sectors. But then you go to the hospital or you go to the health facility, and the old woman there says she does not use a smartphone because there's a superstition around it, or she doesn't want to connect to the internet because someone will hack her. And then all these factors really play active role here. So thank you very much, Nekesa. Moving on to the next, we know how important digitalization of healthcare workforce, how it is very important to achieving universal health coverage. Let's zoom in again from a health systems perspective. What are some of the elements needed to support this new digital health workforce to help them fully meet their transformative potential?
Wow, where do we start? There's a lot of things that we need to ensure that really everyone reaches the potential of this digital health transformation. And the first one, I think, will be what we've been speaking about already, is just providing that ongoing training, right? The nature of innovation is that we are constantly iterating, we're making things better, we're challenging ourselves. So understanding how a tool works last year doesn't mean that you could definitely use it this year. You need to understand the iterations that are made, the new things that it's doing. And as someone that delivers care, for example, as a community health worker or really anyone in the health workforce, what that means for you is that you're going to need to have ongoing training. Think about doctors, in hospitals and the fancy tools that they now need to use either for telemedicine or in operating rooms and so on. They need to be on top of it. They need to be constantly challenging themselves and training themselves, right? And so it's a process of ongoing training that's absolutely necessary for the workforce. And then the other is, like I mentioned before, obviously ensuring access to these digital tools, right? It's and there's a risk of taking it for granted, but I'll tell you, it took so much effort in Kenya to move from, we've developed this tool that's going to be used by community health workers in delivering care, all the way to the community health workers actually have this tool in their hands. There's so many moving parts in between there. You need the right partnerships, you need the right funding, you need the right devices, right? Because you need to understand where this tool is going to be used, what's their capacity going to be, how many do we need, right? And so there's so many questions that need to be answered to ensure access to those digital tools. And for the Ministry of Health to have pulled off having 100,000 plus community health workers with a device in their hand, I think is very commendable, because those are, it's, I don't know, I can't even imagine the kinds of partners and pull and strings that they needed to pull to make that happen. Right. And then third, there's creating policies that encourage this digital health integration in the first place. Right. And the reason that this is important, and how we've seen this happen in the country, in Kenya, is that it was only until we ingrained the work that we wanted to do in the digital health space into laws and policies and regulations that we were able to adopt it and adopt it at scale. Because what has really happened is the leaders, the national governments, the county governments have made a conscious decision of a strategy and a direction that they want to go in. And they've said that regardless the government of the day, this is what the country needs to prosper. And that's such a firm and important foundation to have, that you then build your digital health infrastructure on, because it's so solid. It means that you're now working towards an enabling environment. Everyone is able to refer to policies, able to refer to law and say, this is what we're meant to do, and we have the backing of everyone that we need to have the backing of. And so let's progress, and do the thing. So policies are so important in encouraging digital health integration. And then obviously secure digital platforms. This is a conversation about cybersecurity. You're now collecting data. You're collecting your citizens' data. So how are you ensuring, that you're keeping that safe? Where is your reliable connectivities? And then finally, streamlining your data systems. And data obviously such a huge component, because ultimately the reason that we're collecting this data as we deliver care is because we want to make informed decisions. We want to make informed decisions about the kinds of interventions health interventions that are needed across the country. So for me, that's what would be absolutely necessary in supporting the workforce.
I'm very glad to hear some of the progress being made in Kenya, especially with regards to digital health, how we are slowly moving from the manual system to a more digitally transformed healthcare provision for the good people of Kenya. I must visit Kenya one of these days to
Please
see
do.
for myself.
I will show you around. We will visit the sites from the major cities to the remote towns, and you can see the discrepancies and the incredible work being done at both ends.
Definitely, definitely. I'll make sure to reach out to you when my flight is ready. So, I'm still on the universal health coverage discussion. Do you think a digitally upskilled workforce will help enhance the levels of service delivery to achieve universal health coverage by 2030?
Ah. Will they help enhance service delivery? Yes. But for them to have even more impact, this can't work. An upskilled workforce cannot work in isolation. Absolutely not. There is an entire ecosystem that's absolutely necessary to ensure that the work that this digitally skilled workforce does is not in vain. Yeah. And so, again, think about your funders, think about an environment, a positive, catalyzing environment set by national governments or by other leaders. Uh, think about the academia and the school system and how that's a feeder, for the workforce that that we're wanting to work with now. All these elements need to come together, and so everyone needs to understand their place that supports the digitally upskilled workforce, because that workforce absolutely cannot do it on their own. Yes, they can transform the healthcare delivery. Yes, they can enable the real time, almost real time data with streamlined processes. Yes, because of this upskilled workforce, we have better resource allocation because the data is teaching us what kind of resources are needed in different places. But then what happens after all of that? We need people to act on the data, that we have received. We need people to teach to ensure that we continuously have an upskilled workforce. So the upskilled workforce is fantastic, but they need to demand the support that they require to make their work that more impactful.
Yeah. So, so far, do you think like we are envisioning a future in healthcare which will be led by technology with limited human interaction?
Huh. No. my you know what, Prince, my own perspective is that nothing will ever replace human interaction, and that at the basis of absolutely everything that we continue to do is going to be relationships. And even in the health space, healthcare is going to be driven by relationships between people, relationships between patient and doctor, between community health worker and supervisor, between community health worker and the communities that they serve, between doctors and national governments and other leaders. It's all going to be a relationship between people. And so technology is going to increase the number of people that have access to healthcare. It's going to increase the efficiencies of the services that are provided. It's going to enhance the quality of care, but I think all it's going to do is enhance those human interactions. I don't think that it's going to reduce it. It's just perhaps going to change the way that those human interactions work. If you think about telemedicine, for example, yes, the doctor may not be in the same room as a patient, but there's still some kind of human interaction between them. You can't get away from it. It's the only way that we exist, by building those relationships and make them work. So yeah, I think that the humans and their interactions are still here to stay for a while yet.
Yeah, and that is one of the challenges for people adopting technology. They feel that when technology is introduced and it becomes common amongst people, people are going to lose their jobs. So we don't want technology. We don't want any digitalization. Let's keep
Yes.
our job without technology, because now we have tools that can generate reports, that can interact with people easily. So there's this fear that, oh, if technology comes, it's going to take our job. So let's not entertain it at all. And it's one of the key challenges. Let's move away a bit from universal health coverage conversations, and then I want to know what are some of the important factors that will contribute to us achieving a digitally enabled workforce, and where some of the limitation which hinders towards achieving this reality, like which limitation hinders achieving this reality.
So I think the things that will contribute to achieving a digitally enabled workforce will really be that investment in training, right? So we all need to understand that training the workforce is, it really is an investment in the person, but is also an investment in everything else that has been put in place, in the infrastructure, in the funding, in all the systems that have been put in place. So investment in training is definitely going to be one that contributes, and then a supporting infrastructure, right? And so there needs to be an entire bit of this ecosystem that's thinking about how do we ensure that the infrastructure works. And the infrastructure is, you know what, it's not even just the connectivity. We've spoken about this. It's not about the internet access only. It's also about electricity. It's about the roads. It's about the hospitals, because all of that needs to work as well. Digital devices need to be charged. Hospitals need to have equipment in them. Community health workers and ambulances need roads on which they can travel in order to deliver care. So all of that is really important. And then the policy frameworks that promote digital health, and we've spoken about this as well. But just having those policy frameworks as a foundation is so critical in empowering the rest of the ecosystem to do what they need to do. In terms of the limitations, it's obviously going to be the funding constraints. Even with the best deployments and the best digital infrastructure laid out, there's always going to be challenges of attracting enough funding to keep these processes going, to keep the deployment sustainable. And I think this is a challenge that we all face in the digital health space, where we're trying to understand. We know that we've got a good thing going. We know that we've built good solutions and services, but how do we ensure that they still exist 5, 10, 20 years from now? So that's a huge challenge figuring out the funding. And then again, just fixing those infrastructure gaps, and finally fixing the digital literacy, because again, the digital literacy is an ongoing work, right? And so one limitation definitely is having the resources to ensure that you're constantly teaching and ensuring that everyone is digitally literate on all spectrums, everyone from national governments to ministries of health, all the way to the patient, because the patient needs to have ownership of that process as well. Everything from understanding what their interaction is with their health provider, all the way to understanding how their data is being stored and being used, and having access to that data themselves so they can take ownership of their own care. So digital literacy is a core part of ensuring that that happens also.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how in your opinion, how do you think we can ensure that the investment in organizational capacity, digital coverage, and cybersecurity are properly aligned with the evolving healthcare needs? And again, in your opinion, what should be prioritized by the wider ecosystem to ensure we work in a collaborative manner? Another 2 in 1 question again.
So, the first part of that question, there's no surprises there around. You definitely need to ensure that organizations have the capacity to do the work that they say that they'll do. That means they have the right systems and the right people and the right processes. So that's a given. You need digital coverage across the countries, all of this cybersecurity data. These are important issues, which I think are non-negotiable and which are being tackled. And so I wouldn't even belabor that at all. I'll tell you what I think needs to be prioritized that maybe isn't being prioritized right now. It's really about the relationships, right? And we really are in a space where money doesn't do all the talking anymore. Relationships do the talking. And what that means is that, yes, in order to give money to a project, a funder needs to vet the entrepreneur or the government or the organization, whatever it is. But the entrepreneur or government organization also needs to be vetting the funder, because you need to make sure that the money that's being offered is actually money that you want, you know. And so it's a two-way thing, and it's about building relationships. And I think that that needs to be a focus of the ecosystem, to ensure that we are meeting on on a level playing ground, right? And so how do we make those dynamics work for us? So there is no substitute for due diligence, right? And so for sure, build the relationships, but then also do your due diligence. Is this money that you want? Is this something that you want to, is it something that you want to invest in? But there's also no substitute for risk. If you want to support innovation, at the end of the day, you have to take risk. If you're in the business of building world-class solutions and funding world-class solutions, at the end of the day, you have to take risk. There's no substitute for that. And so being comfortable with risk is another thing that I feel that our ecosystem needs to prioritize, to be, let's be comfortable with it, because that's just the way that it is. And then there really needs to be this desire to change the world, right? We need to have that common thing that draws us together. What's that shared value, right? And sometimes we'll try and engage and run projects with people just because here's the money, here's the project, let's go ahead and do this thing. But majority of times you're going to stall somewhere, because at some point you're going to realize a misalignment of priorities, because you're not in it for the right reason. You haven't figured out your shared value. So as an ecosystem, we need to figure out our shared value. And if your shared value, despite your millions of dollars, is not, if your value, despite the millions of dollars, is not the same as, a government's value, then it's okay for everyone to say, no, this is not going to work. And in the long run, it becomes a lot better for us. But then that doesn't mean that you abandon your duty of care. Yes, I know that I'm romanticizing by saying we have a desire to change the world, but I'm also saying that there is a duty. We do have to have our duty of care. So we must ensure that processes, policies, etc., that all of those work as well. So there's a lot of work to do within the ecosystem, and so many things to prioritize. But I think ultimately it's about the relationships and the motivations. And if you get that right, then the rest just tends to fall into place.
Thank you. We are getting closer to the end of our conversation. Quickly,
Okay.
I would like to find out what your organization is doing to address these gaps that you've mentioned, and the opportunities that you've also mentioned around digital transformation of health over the next 5 years. So I'm basically asking you, what is your strategic plan?
Oh, our strategic plan is open. It's available on medic.org for anyone to see. But what I will say, our priorities as Medic, and Medic, for anyone who doesn't know, we are the stewards of the Community Health Toolkit community. The Community Health Toolkit is used across the continent by local and national governments to support the community health workers in delivering care in some of the most remote communities. And so, where we are focused on, we're really committed to addressing the digital health transformation. And we want to do that by investing in making sure that our community health toolkit is developed to be as accessible as possible to everyone that needs to use it. Right. And what that means for us is that we are investing a lot in democratizing the community health toolkit. Right. And so that means that you should be able to use it regardless where you are on the continent, regardless what continent that you're on. The community health toolkit is available for you to use. It's open source, it's offline first, and that makes it a tool that's able to adapt to different circumstances in different communities. But we're also ensuring that you have the resources and the knowledge that you need. And so we have an academy that is available for anyone to access, so you can learn at your own pace. We have an entire community available to support you. And what we're doing for the next 5 years is ensuring that this academy continues to be robust and up to date with regards to the kind of knowledge that you need within the community health space to support your work. But the second thing that we're doing that I am actually very excited to be leading is building local capacity. So we, over the next 5 years, want to ensure that developers in Kenya, developers in Mali, developers in Nepal have the resources that they need to support their local ministries of health. You know, Ultimately, it makes a lot more sense for a developer in Uganda to be supporting the Ministry of Health in Uganda. And we want to make it so that's possible. And so we're investing a lot in ensuring that we can teach these developers, teach implementers, and anyone else that is critical to the community health space, ensure that they have the knowledge to support their local communities. So localization is a huge deal for us in the next 5 years, and truly excited to be one of the people working on that at Medic. And then finally, putting our community at the center of the work. And over the next 5 years, you're going to see so much democratization of the community health toolkit space, so many new faces, so many new features, all being led by our community. So we're really looking forward to the community taking a lot more ownership of the community health toolkit. It is an open source tool at the end of the day. And so it's in our DNA for this to happen. And so building out our community and giving them a lot more ownership of the work is definitely something that we're looking forward to in the next 5 years.
Thank you very much, Nekesa. It has been a very interesting conversation so far. And quickly before I let you go, we have this fun session on a podcast which we call Rapid Dialogue. So in like 2 seconds, you answer the question. So it's like more question and answer to know the fun side about you. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yes. Okay. So one, what is your favorite travel destination?
Ooh, Italy.
Ooh. What is your spirit animal?
Lioness. I love the
Ah,
soft power. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. What is the last movie you watched?
The last movie I watched was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And I watched
The-
it. I watched it. I was helping my son with homework, and he had to watch it and then draw things and answer some questions. So it was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But before that, can I say it was Transformers, which I absolutely love. I grew up watching Transformers, and so it's so fantastic to see it in the cinemas now, and then to be able to watch it with my son and experience him be excited about seeing stuff transform was heaven.
we are also speaking about digital transformation, so it's
There you
in
go.
line with it. What is your go-to coffee order?
Oh, has to be strong, black, hot. No sugar, no milk. Just the way our ancestors intended it.
Oh, nice. Last but one, what do you think is the greatest technology ever created?
Ah, this is a hard one. You know what? It has to be anything that allows you to connect with the people that you love. That's it.
Hmm, true, true, true.
Yeah.
Very intelligent answer. And finally, what is your message to our young practitioners of digital health?
Huh. Um, to, to young practitioners of digital health, I stand on the shoulders of giants. What I know who I am is a combination of what I've experienced from myself, what I've experienced through other people, and what other people have had the patience and the kindness to show me, right? And my message to you is to demand that for yourselves, to demand people like me to show you and teach you what we know, and also to stand on our shoulders to do what you need to do. And there's so much work left to be done. Foundations have been set. we're in a digital age, and there's a lot of solutions and services that we're building that matter to a lot of communities. But we need to move on to scale and scale across the continent, because that's what our continents, regardless where we are across the world, that's what our continents need. And so my message to you is demand of our time, stand on our shoulders, and take our work to the next level, because there's so much left to do and we're leaving it in such capable hands.
Demand, demand, demand. Thank you very much, Nekesa. It has been a very interesting conversation, and I wish we could do this some other time again. To those of you who are new here, do not forget to click on the subscription button, like, put your comments down there. What do you think about the fun part of Nekesa? If you agree with some of her submissions, please let us know. And do not forget to share so we can reach to the wider audience. Thank you very much. I have been your host, Prince Bonney. See you again sometime. Bye bye.